There exists a type of monster that people have dubbed player. Every night, the elite bring these players out to fight for entertainment in a place deep underground. Players are nothing more than monsters with thoughts only of killing. But one night, they regained their own will and began to revolt. They destroyed the entire arena and killed all the guests, leaving only 13 players and 2 survivors. Many years passed, and the players became increasingly violent. They brazenly killed people in broad daylight without anyone realizing it, and the detective here is the one who has been in charge of and pursuing this case for a long time. However, the chairman of the tournament from back then realized that this was the 5th time the players he let loose have wreaked havoc. But this time, it was nothing compared to the past. He decided he had to find the child with the bracelet because it was the key to dealing with the players. And the person possessing that power is none other than our protagonist, Jin. Jin lives with his grandfather in a slum. He sees helping others as his job, while his grandfather wants him to understand that fighting without a reason is just violence. One day, Jin encountered a young woman being surrounded by 3 thugs. He offered to help her for a price of 10,000 yen. She agreed, so he rushed in and kicked the thug in the middle in the face, then moved swiftly to take down the other 2 one by one. Jin's friend, Kuga, arrived and scolded Jin for not calling him when dealing with criminals. Kuga believed that they were a team and should find criminals and come up with solutions together. Kuga dragged Jin away, and Jin didn't even have time to collect his payment. Kuga insisted that justice was not something to be profited from. Jin noticed that Kuga's sister, Konoha, had her hand bandaged and wondered if she also had an angel ring like his. His grandfather forbade showing it to others, but Jin showed both of them, and it became their secret. At this time, the murderous player had met a mysterious person who had a task for him. Later, Jin met the young woman again in the alley, and she paid him as promised, along with giving him a business card to arrange a future meeting. Jin returned home to proudly show his grandfather the money he had earned, only to find that his grandfather had been severely injured by someone. His grandfather taught him one final lesson, that this was the retribution for having resorted to violence. After that, his grandfather passed away. Jin took him to several clinics, but they refused to treat him. Because Jin didn't have enough money, he watched other families being happy and remembered the promise he made to save money to buy a house where he and his grandfather could live together. Desperate, he called Kuga. But Kuga was arguing with his father, who forbade him from associating with someone like Jin. His father broke the phone, cutting off their communication. Jin, feeling helpless, sought out the young woman from before. She helped Jin get his grandfather into a hospital, where he met the detective. The detective suggested that the young woman leave if she was just a friend, but as she was about to leave, she turned back and invited Jin to stay at her place for the night. She allowed Jin to take a bath, and he learned that she once had a husband and children. She joined him in the bath and introduced herself as a Kemi. Hearing that Jin had no parents, she felt great compassion for him, and for the second time, Jin felt warmth from someone. Meanwhile, the tournament chairman learned that Jin's grandfather had died and that Jin had left with a woman. The next day, Jin and Akemi went shopping together. That evening, they encountered the murderous player. He injured Akemi and revealed that he was the one who harmed Jin's grandfather. Jin stood up to protect Akemi, not wanting her to die like his grandfather. The player knocked Jin aside and struck Akemi in the face as she tried to protect him. The player transformed into his original form, which made Jin so furious that he unleashed his power. He grabbed the player by the tongue and threw him down, then lunged forward with a punch before collapsing. The mysterious figure arrived with another person dressed in white. These two dealt with the player, who had broken the rules by harming humans. The player was eliminated, and Jin woke up in the hospital the next morning. The detective gave him the bracelet that his grandfather had left behind and advised him to always hold his head high to find hope. And now, Jin's hope was Akemi. He met her again, but she had been injured and lost half of her face. Many years later, the mysterious figure recruited another player, one who could use fire, to work for him. Kuga had grown up and remained steadfast in his commitment to upholding justice. Konoha and her mother frequently distributed charitable food donations. One day, Konoha witnessed 2 people arguing and fighting over spilled food. She intervened but got caught in the commotion. Jin arrived and stopped the fight with just a few words before walking away. Konoha recognized Jin by the bracelet on his wrist. The homeless people, seeing that Konoha knew Jin, told her that Jin was working as a bodyguard for some people, but often helped them avoid violence. Kuga's father's assistant came to remind Konoha and her mother about attending a party and promised to keep their charitable activities a secret from the director. Meanwhile, the chairman was diligently researching to create a player named Z to deal with the escaped players. That evening, Jin returned home and told Akemi about meeting Konoha and how she was still actively helping those in need. Kuga was praised for being at the top of his school's football team. Konoha accidentally ran into her grandfather, who was also the chairman, and she was terrified because of their unpleasant past. Kuga was asked about his dreams for the future, and he mentioned wanting to become a hero of justice, which made everyone laugh. Kuga later heard from Konoha about meeting Jin, which made him very happy. He called in some scientists and wanted to patrol the streets with Konoha. He explained that they only served him, moved by his ideals. Suddenly, they noticed a fire, so Kuga applied fire-resistant gel. Kuga's job was to catch the criminal while leaving the injured to the firefighters. Jin encountered the player who started the fire and was dragged into the adjacent building. The player transformed and fought Jin with all his might. Kuga arrived and asked Konoha to stay outside and help while he went inside. He used a device to suck out the smoke and continued deeper into the building. Kuga accidentally met Jin inside. Kuga used a fire extinguisher to put out the flames, and they found a mother and her 4 children trapped inside. Assessing the situation, Kuga decided they had to leave the mother behind. He called Konoha to shoot a rope up, but the floor suddenly collapsed. Jin put the mother and her 4 children on the bed and surrounded them with pillows. Kuga believed Jin was endangering them, but Jin would rather save them all, or let them go together than leave the children orphaned. He then pushed the bed down and jumped after it, while Kuga took the rope path. Kuga fell when the wall collapsed, but he still managed to find the firefighters and help them save the family. Jin faced off against the fire-using player again. Kuga discovered the family was safe. The fire player was confident he was unbeatable as long as there was fire. He stabbed Jin, but Jin survived, transformed, and broke the player's arm with a punch. The player tried to absorb fire to heal, but Jin used Kuga's fire extinguisher to spray his face, putting out the flames. Konoha arrived just as Jin collapsed in front of her. She retrieved his pendant, but the firefighters wouldn't let her touch him, so she watched as he was taken to the hospital. Kuga later tried to explain to his father that Jin was the one who saved the family. His father insisted Kuga take the credit to gain a reputation if he wanted to uphold justice. He heard Konoha mention that Jin had an angel ring, so he checked and realized Jin was the person he was looking for. Jin woke up to find Akemi being held hostage by a player. Meanwhile, Kuga was training intensively, recalling their first meeting when they were both chasing a thief. Kuga blocked the thief, but Jin took him down. While Kuga called the police, Jin returned the stolen bag to the victim and asked for a fee. In the same situation, Kuga saw the criminal, but Jin saw the victim. Back with Jin, he transformed and, filled with rage, kicked the player away. The chairman noticed Jin was still in his incomplete white form, but saw that even this form far exceeded the trial versions. The fake version of Jin attacked him, but Jin stood firm, taking the hits before the fake lunged at him to deliver a punch. Feeling annoyed, Jin retaliated with a punch that instantly killed his opponent. He then saw his reflection in a two-way mirror. The chairman thought Jin had seen them, but Jin only saw himself and was disgusted, causing him to smash the mirror. He didn't know who these people were or why they harmed his sister. At that moment, the fake Akemi approached him. The chairman asked Jin's grandfather how to return him to normal, and the only way was to eliminate all the players around him. The fake Akemi was also a type of player, and though Jin would never harm her, a person pulled out a gun and shot her. Jin reverted to his human form and passed out. That day, Konoha went to find Kuga. She saw that Jin had been discharged from the hospital and didn't know where he was to return his necklace. But Kuga didn't want to meet Jin yet. He wanted to become like the heroes in movies to compare to Jin. Konoha realized Koga was not acting for justice, but for praise. Meanwhile, Jin regained consciousness, but refused to listen to the chairman, so he was drugged. He woke up again, and the chairman introduced himself as Amaj, explaining that he knew Jin's grandfather, Kanzaki. Amaj led Jin back to the underground arena where the players used to fight. He showed Jin something called the accusation ring, which was similar to the one on Jin's hand but larger. This ring forced players to revert to their monster forms, exposing those who blended into human society. Amage knew this because he had built the arena and created the players. Jin blamed him for the tragedies that befell his grandfather and Akemi. Amage didn't deny it, stating that Jin was his hope to combat the players. Jin tried to end that hope by biting his tongue, but he was too weak to do so. The larger accusation ring and a one on Jin's hand suddenly resonated with each other, causing the larger ring to shatter. Amage led Jin into the arena, explaining that he had initially created it to fund his company, but it had backfired. Kanzaki and Amage had collaborated to create a being capable of fighting the players, and that being was Z, who was also Jin. But when Kanzaki created Jin, he took him away, intending to raise him as a normal child. Fate, however, brought Jin back here, and Amage promised that if Jin joined him, his sister would be safe. Jin didn't understand, so Amage took him to see that his sister was still alive. When Jin tried to leave, Amage stopped him, warning that now that his identity as Z was revealed, anyone close to him would be in danger. Heartbroken, Jin left, while Akemi accidentally ran into Konoha. Konoha returned Jin's necklace to Akemi, knowing she lived with Jin. But Akemi suggested Konoha return it herself to have an excuse to see Jin again. Amage then gave Jin two choices: join him as Z and fight the players to protect those he loved, or return to live with Akemi with constant danger looming. Amage promised to help Jin become his complete red form if he agreed, and to help Akemi heal her face and reunite with her child. Jin accepted, on the condition that Amage help Akemi. Amage agreed and advised Jin to write a letter to inform Akemi. The mysterious figure found a piece of the broken accusation ring in the underground arena. Time passed, and Jin caused trouble again, resulting in his arrest. The detective bailed him out, as Jin was only arrested for helping someone. As soon as he was released, Jin demanded payment from the person he had helped, but the detective chased him out, telling him to cause less trouble. Jin asked why the detective cared so much, and the detective hinted at a possible connection between them. Jin left, remembering his grandfather's advice from years ago. Meanwhile, several players committed a crime in an alley and were accidentally seen by a young woman. To silence her, they chased her. Amage's men observed through cameras as she entered Jin's house, but they did not intervene. It had been 2 years since Jin started working with Amage. They also noticed that Konoha and her mother were doing charity work in the area. Kuga, ever since the fire incident, struggled to focus on his quest to become a hero of justice. Nevertheless, the 3 scientists continued to improve his equipment, waiting for the day Kuga would resume his mission. When Jin returned home, he encountered Konoha and her mother doing charity work. The homeless people mentioned that since Jin arrived, the violence had significantly decreased. Konoha tried to start a conversation with Jin, telling him that Akemi had mentioned he found his family and moved away. Remembering Amage's words, Jin tried to send Konoha away. When he got home, he found the young woman hiding in his closet. He told her to leave, but she was terrified, and mentioned the horrifying scene she had witnessed, which startled Jin. Jin prepared a meal for her, insisting she leave after eating. However, after witnessing such an event, she lacked the courage to go outside. Suddenly, Jin sensed something and ran out of the house. The girl followed and found her belongings in the middle of the street. As soon as she touched them, the 3 players appeared. Amage's men observed the situation, and Jin arrived just in time. Jin told the girl that he would help her if she paid him. She agreed, and one player mocked him for demanding payment while acting as a hero. Jin knocked the player out and engaged in a fight with the sand-using player. Jin kicked him away, but the player quickly reformed. One of the supervisors, to ensure safety, shot the girl with a tranquilizer dart. Realizing Jin knew about players, the sand player transformed into his original form in front of Jin. The other 2 players, fearing the enforcer, fled. Jin bit a candy Amage had given him to control his transformation. However, the sand player overpowered him as Jin couldn't transform immediately. The player began to suffocate Jin with sand, causing him immense pain, prompting Jin to punch his head off. Despite this, the player didn't die. He turned into a beetle and fled, leaving his body behind. Jin, now transformed, tore the body apart. Amage arrived to check on Jin, who hadn't reverted to human form and was starting to decompose. Amage ordered his men to find and kill the player before things got worse. The player, thinking he had survived, was confronted by the enforcer, a figure in white, who executed him for breaking the rules and harming humans. Thanks to the enforcer, Jin reverted to his human form. As Jin took the girl back home, the enforcer appeared and pressed a knife to Jin's back. Amaj turned pale upon seeing the enforcer, but the cameras had been disabled by the mysterious figure. The enforcer didn't know who Jin was because players were neither fully human nor completely inhuman. The mysterious figure informed the enforcer that Jin was Z, and if Jin died, the leadership would be displeased. Hearing this, the enforcer let Jin go. Jin wanted to know who the enforcer was, but he only revealed that he and the enforcer belonged to an organization called Yvonne. He couldn't disclose much more as it was confidential. Just then, Amaji's men arrived, and the mysterious figure vanished. Amaj explained to Jin about the enforcer, whose job was to eliminate players who broke the rules and revealed their true forms to humans. Jin mentioned the mysterious figure, but no one had any information about him. The next morning, the girl woke up and saw Jin cooking. She asked for a glass of water to take her medication, as she often suffered from severe headaches. She then requested to use the bathroom, and Jin asked for her name. She introduced herself as Tanaka. Jin allowed her to stay for the night but told her to leave the next day since he had dealt with the players. Tanaka went to shower, and Jin suddenly entered to remove a camera that Amaji's men had installed. She thought he was peeping, but he didn't care. Meanwhile, Kuga arrived at a warehouse where his assistant and 3 scientists were developing technology to aid his quest for justice. They had made him a suit, but Kuga wanted it to look exactly like the ones in movies, with a white cape and a symbol on the mask. Kuga left, hoping they would fulfill his request so he could confront his vision of justice. That evening, Konoha went to the pool to learn how to swim. As Kuga walked down the street, he was approached by a man claiming to be his fan, who wanted to test him to see what a hero like him would choose. The man showed Kuga that Konoha was in trouble at the pool because she couldn't swim and also threatened to kill 3 other people if Kuga didn't follow him. Would he save his sister or 3 strangers? Kuga chose to save his sister, arriving at the pool to find Konoha safe. However, the 3 strangers were killed, just as the man had said. Juro later met with the swimming instructor, who turned out to be a player disillusioned with harming others. The bar was revealed to be the headquarters of the Ivan organization, and the man introduced himself as Juro. This organization despised law-breaking players because they threatened the peaceful lives of those who follow the rules. The bald man, the leader of Ivan, told Juro not to harm humans, except for those in the Amaji family. The next morning, Kuga learned about the discovery of the bodies of 3 dead female students. Realizing Juro wasn't joking, Kuga received another call from him, saying Kuga had made the wrong choice and that he would test him again. Kuga met with his assistant, who advised letting the police handle the situation for now and waiting for Shizuka's next move before planning to catch him. Konoha called Kuga, suggesting they meet somewhere, possibly with Jin. But Kuga wasn't ready to face Jin yet. The 2 players who had escaped before were now overcome with a desire to kill, and Haitani, the mysterious figure, approached them. Haitani urged them to target Jin, assuring them he'd keep the enforcer occupied. Juro also collaborated with Haitani, unaware of his true intentions regarding Jin. Jin decided to go shopping as he had run out of supplies, with Tanaka following him. He realized he had left his transformation candy at home. Meanwhile, Konoha and her friend arrived in the area to return Jin's belongings but saw him with Tanaka. Feeling awkward, Konoha turned away, and Jin chased after her, preventing her from returning his things. The 2 players noticed this and realized Konoha was connected to Jin. Tanaka questioned Jin about his relationship with Konoha, but he sensed danger and ran off. Returning, he found Konoha and her friend had been captured. One player revealed himself, expressing his hatred for Jin helping humans as a player. Jin realized he had forgotten his candy. Konoha regained consciousness and, under the player's watch, managed to free one hand to call Kuga. At that moment, Kuga, now in his complete armor, received his sister's call for help. Jin was being tortured by the player because he couldn't transform at will. Meanwhile, Kuga set out, prioritizing justice over rescuing people. Jin was beaten repeatedly but still couldn't transform. Hearing the player doing something to Konoha, he rushed to fight but was no match for the transformed player. The player kicked Jin off the rooftop, and Jin realized how heavy his body felt. He began to understand the feeling of wanting to protect someone. Amaj arrived and saw that Jin didn't have his candy, but wanted Jin to find another solution. The player noticed Jin couldn't transform and decided to send a message to the other player to kill someone. Just as he was about to do it, Jin lunged at him. The player revealed his true form to Konoha, showing her the result of her family's creation. Kuga discovered Konoha's location from her call. Jin kept running, feeling his ability to transform slowly increasing. He grabbed a steel rod and stabbed the player, then continued to run because saving Konoha was more important than fighting. Heitani warned the red player not to underestimate Jin, as he would be in trouble if Jin transformed. Meanwhile, Tanaka was still at Jin's house, starting to realize she might have feelings for him. She intended to take a bath, but had a severe headache, and then saw many beetles in the house. Jin's transformation process halted, and he entered a camera-free area. After some searching, he found Konoha and tried to take her to safety, but the player guarding her attacked him. Jin set Konoha down to fight but was too injured to do much. Konoha's friend regained consciousness and screamed, but Konoha silenced her. At that moment, Hyuga arrived and shot the player's head off. He reunited with Jin, who urged him to save Konoha first. Hyuga called for support to rescue Konoha and her friend. He used a flying chair to transport them, but it could only carry 2 people. The assistant wanted Kuga to return and leave Jin and the friend behind, but Kuga chose to stay and fight the monsters. The assistant argued that the suit was still experimental, and that if something happened to Kuga, the corporation would be affected. He used a logical comparison to make Kuga reconsider, but it felt like Jiro's test. Jin urged Kuga to take Konoha to safety first, warning that she would be in serious danger otherwise. Jin didn't tell Kuga about the player, but wanted him to go outside and fight the monsters like a real hero. Jin struggled to move and encountered other homeless people. They wanted to avenge the one who put him in this state, as Jin had protected them many times. Jin couldn't stop them and watched as they ran off, only to face the giant shrimp created by the player. Kuga arrived and dealt with them, allowing the homeless to escape. Amaji observed this development. Meanwhile, Jin encountered Heitani again. Heitani kicked him into a camera-free area and saw Jin struggling to force a transformation. Jin had lost that ability since resonating with the larger accusation ring. Heitani revealed his identity and then stabbed Jin with a spike made from a fragment of the accusation ring. Jin experienced excruciating pain, but began the transformation process. Red lightning surged, and Jin transformed into his complete form. Jin created a massive shockwave, and Heitani finally witnessed Jin's red form. Jin found this form strange, feeling almost detached from his true self. He moved at incredible speed, surprising Amaji, as Jin's stats surpassed all previous experiments. The player intended to find Jin, but was shot down by Kuga, who decided to confront him. The player revealed his true form, shocking Kuga, who hadn't known monsters existed. Realizing his gun was ineffective, Kuga switched to using a sword. They engaged in a fierce battle. Meanwhile, the other player, who had survived, sent a swarm of beetles to attack Tanaka, but encountered Jin. The resonance from Jin's ring forced the player to revert to his original form. He tried to attack Jin, but Jin swiftly dodged and delivered a powerful kick. Jin continuously dodged attacks, climbed onto the player, and prepared to deliver a finishing blow when Heitani appeared in the shadows. Skillfully avoiding the cameras, Heitani remained unseen by Amaji. Heitani encouraged Jin to deal with the player, who intended to harm the girl with Jin. Heitani had manipulated the player into fighting Jin to push him to his limits and trigger his red form. Since the player had violated Ivan's rules, Jin didn't hesitate to strike. As the player tried to release a beetle to escape, Jin eliminated it as well. Jin was pushing his limits, but Amaji was unaware of the upcoming challenges. Jin demanded to know who Heitani was. The accusation ring couldn't reveal Heitani's identity, indicating his immense strength. Heitani, not wanting to fight yet, left voluntarily. Meanwhile, the leader of Ivan, hearing about Heitani's presence at the scene with the 2 rule-breaking players, summoned Heitani. Konoha and her friend were now safe, but Kuga struggled because his suit's performance depended on his willpower. Fearful due to his lack of experience fighting the player, Kuga's assistant informed him that Konoha was safe, restoring his spirit to continue the battle. As the player charged, Jin kicked him away. Kuga recognized Jin by the bracelet on his wrist. They decided to team up, facing a more formidable opponent. The player released 6 giant shrimp. Jin suggested they eliminate all the shrimp simultaneously to prevent the player from escaping. The player mocked Jin for siding with humans and protecting them like a slave. But Jin fought driven by his own will. They quickly defeated a few shrimp, but the player charged at Jin. Kuga attacked, forcing the player to block with one of his claws. Jin grabbed the other claw, but his body overheated, preventing him from attacking. The player released smaller shrimp to assault them both, targeting Jin directly. The broken spike caused Jin to revert to his white form. Meanwhile, Konoha's mother received Jin's bracelet from her friend, realizing Konoha always intended to return it to Jin. Jin, pushed back by the player, urged Kuga to hold him while he jumped to retrieve a sword for Kuga. Jin retrieved the sword and threw it into the back of the shrimp player, then ran to swap places with Kuga. Kuga took the sword and switched back to his gun, shooting down the smaller shrimp. Jin charged at the shrimp player, delivering a fatal blow and crushing his heart just as Kuga finished off the smaller one. Heitani met with Jiro, instructing him to approach Koga and use him to make Jin realize his true destiny. Jin, having reverted to his human form, was caught by Kuga, who felt sad knowing Jin had been fighting the monsters alone. Amaj, surprised to see Kuga, was puzzled that Jin had returned to his human form, while his transformation stats remained unchanged. Back at the house, Jin worried about Tanaka, but she was safe. The homeless people came to thank Koga and Jin, and Kuga realized Jin might be the true hero. Suddenly, Amaji's men arrived, summoning Kuga and Jin and allowing them to bring Tanaka along. Meeting with his grandfather, Kuga demanded answers, and Amaji knew he could no longer keep secrets. Tanaka was taken to the hospital, claiming she couldn't remember much about what had happened, leaving Amaji's men with no leads. Jin stayed with her for a while. Meanwhile, Heitani was questioned by his superior. He claimed he was merely trying to stop the two players and wasn't instigating them. He explained that he couldn't stop them because he feared the Red Z, and since they broke the rules, they deserved no mercy. Heitani proposed handling the Z situation and bringing Z into the organization. The next morning, Kuva's father asked the assistant to manage the witnesses and Kuva's suit. He needed detailed documentation on how the suit was made. As they left, the vice president instructed the assistant to continue researching the suit to ensure Kuga would be ready to inherit the company. Kuga and Jin went to meet Konoha. Kuga, now aware of everything, wanted to fight alongside Jin, but Jin refused. Kuga tried to persuade him, but Jin disliked the idea of being a hero of justice like Kuga. When they met Konoha, she asked about the players and her family's secrets. Jin remained silent, even as Kuga was about to reveal the truth. As they stepped outside, Jin suggested that the less Konoha knew, the better. He then went to pick up Tanaka from the hospital. Kuga's mother wanted to know his plans, and Kuga affirmed that he would continue to fight to protect everyone as a member of the Amaj family. Jin met with Amaj, who advised him to end things with Tanaka, reminding him of the consequences of getting close to anyone. He also instructed Jin to come to the lab. When Jin met Tanaka, he suggested she go home, expressing disdain for anyone who disliked their own family. Realizing she was unhappy with her family, Jin promised to come for her. Overhearing this, Konoha realized she would never be with Jin. Tanaka left, and Jin went to meet Amaji, with Kuga accompanying him. The group returned to the lab, where Amaji explained the process of Jin's creation. Suddenly, Kanzaki, who had been silent for 2 years, spoke up, revealing that Jin had become human. Jin learned his grandfather was still alive and confronted Amaji. Amaji signaled Professor KB to open the secure room, revealing the remaining parts of Kanzaki, now sustained by a machine. Jin was heartbroken. Amaji intended to bring Kanzaki back to serve as a databank, but Kanzaki had his own will. He asked Jin about the way to achieve his complete red form, but Jin only wanted to free him from the machine to let him rest in peace. Before passing away, Kanzaki left a clue. A red stone. Kuga remembered the bracelet Konoha had. He called his mother to ask about the stone, hoping they could retrieve it. Heitani overheard this and sent an invisible intruder to steal a pendant. The intruder easily bypassed the house's security system and used infrared glasses to locate Konoha's room. Disguising himself as Jin, he demanded the pendant, claiming it was a keepsake from her grandfather. At that moment, Jin and Kuga returned. As soon as they entered, 2 figures resembling Jin appeared, created from Jin's blood because he wasn't yet complete. Kuga and Jin rushed in to take down each enemy. But while Kuga managed to capture one, the other bypassed Jin and charged towards Mr. Amaji. Dr. KP stepped in to shield Mr. Amaji, sacrificing his life. While Mr. Amaji was only injured on the shoulder, the bodyguards had to escort him out. Meanwhile, Jin managed to transform, and the two enemies started to disintegrate, being taken down in just one move. Kuga went to check on Konoha, while Jin went to see if Mr. Amaji was okay. Outside, Jin saw that Mr. Amaji was fine, but Dr. KP regretted not seeing Jin's complete transformation. Jin then went to meet Konoha, only to find her necklace missing and her seemingly afraid of him. Old man Jiro had obtained the necklace and detonated the entire mansion. The group then reunited at the hospital. They were puzzled about how Heitani knew about the necklace and acted immediately upon getting the information. They suspected that Heitani might try to recruit Jin to their side. However, Kuga was determined to support Jin, so that he wouldn't be swayed by Heitani. Jin suddenly received a message from Tanaka. Meanwhile, Konoha wanted to know everything about why her mother was forbidden from volunteering before and who had been protecting her, as well as the importance of the bracelet. Kuga returned to his father's company and wanted Jin to join his strategic meeting, but Jin had an appointment with Tanaka and left. On his way, Jin encountered the head of the Ivome organization. Jin intended to confront him, but a pursuer appeared, threatening him from behind. Kuga, on the other hand, was informed by his assistant about the data transfer to his father, but Kuga refused, knowing his father would use it for military purposes. The assistant promised to handle it discreetly. Back to Jin, the head of the organization didn't want to fight but apologized for not controlling Heitani. He wanted peace and needed Jin to take care of Heitani, as he couldn't handle it himself. Jin agreed to help because he was also fed up with Heitani. Kuga had asked a scientist to upgrade his armor to enable flight. Suddenly, Kuga received news that his sister had disappeared. Meanwhile, Jin returned home and met Tanaka. She couldn't live at home anymore, but Jin didn't want to get close to anyone for fear of putting them in danger. However, she insisted on staying with him and being his family. Jin embraced her and vowed to protect her at all costs. Kuga then received a call from Jiro, who knew where Konoha was. Kuga decided to go find his sister, ready to brave any danger. Meanwhile, Jin was happily spending time with Tanaka, dreaming of buying a house where they could live together as a family. The way he earned money after helping people was his means to achieve this. But with Tanaka, he refused payment because he wanted her to be his family. Suddenly, Jin received a call, informing him that Konoha was missing. Kuga met with Jiro and got into his car to go, with the support team attaching a tracker. However, after driving for a while, Jiro sedated Kuga, and the signal was cut off. Jin promised to return and tell Tanaka everything about himself. Kuga woke up in a hotel room, still armed, and Jiro told him that he would only know the truth about Konoha's whereabouts if he made it to him. Kuga went to the last room at the end of the hall, only to find it was a party room filled with Kuga's female fans. Jiro wanted him to choose, either find his sister or help the girls escape. Pressured by both Jiro and the girls, Kuga hid in the bathroom. Meanwhile, Jin suspected Konoha might be with Akemi, so he called her to ask. Suddenly, Kuga met a girl who also sensed something was wrong and found a secret passage, since there was no signal. Kuga didn't know if she was part of Jiro's test. Another girl then rushed in, calling for Kuga as a hidden room had been opened. Unsure which way led to Jiro, Kuga remembered Jin's methods and decided to let the girl lead while he protected the others. As they returned to the room, the girl pulled Kuga onto the bed, telling him he had made the wrong choice again. She was suddenly crushed by a heavy object, causing the girls to scream and run to the door. Kuga was blamed for the murder, but just then, the girls managed to open the door and ran out. Kuga had to follow, but the door locked behind him. Jiro gave Kuga another test, releasing a robot and giving him a choice. Ahead, there was an elevator leading to Jiro, but Kuga would have to leave the girls behind. Without hesitation, Kuga drew his sword and fought, while Konoha was actually with Akemi. Konoha hadn't told anyone she was there, not even Jin, as she felt everyone was hiding things from her, and wondered if Jin was really going to live with his parents. At that moment, the television signal cut out and Heitani's image appeared. He revealed the existence of evil to humanity, deciding to show rather than tell. He called for the players to reveal themselves and continuously attack humans. Jin called back and reminded Akemi to let Konoha in if she arrived, while Kuga struggled to fight the robot. Jiro argued that Kuga's sense of justice had too many flaws. Heitani was tired of living in the shadows of human society, believing that players, with their superior strength, should not fear humans. As the monsters wreaked havoc, Jin arrived to deal with them, and Heitani noticed his guest had also arrived. At home, Tanaka was waiting for Jin when someone came to abduct her. Heitani revealed that the Amaji Corporation had created the players, so any hatred should be directed at the Amaji family. Kuga then realized that his opponent was a player, not a machine. Losing his sword in the fight, he lunged and grabbed it, then switched to a gun, and shot straight into the player's throat. However, the former fans of Kuga turned against him, accusing him of being a murderer. The door behind him opened, revealing an elevator at the end of the hall. Kuga thought Jiro had relented and was letting them go. But as the girls ran towards the elevator, lasers appeared and killed them all. Devastated, Kuga heard Jiro claim he had freed them from their miserable lives. One surviving girl told Kuga the next path, but he didn't know if it was another test. With no other option, he proceeded. Meanwhile, Jin had just defeated a player when the detective arrived. Jin reverted to human form, but was cursed by others for being one of the players. The detective said he had captured Jin to help him escape. At this moment, Akemi learned that the Amaji family was about to hold a press conference. She had previously received money from them to remove her scars, but had refused and returned it. She didn't particularly like the Amaji family, but Konoha was an exception. Meanwhile, Kuga had reached Jiro, but the girl accompanying him had stolen his gun and was now threatening him. Jiro knew Kuga had realized his sister wasn't there. Kuga simply wanted to find him to enact his own sense of justice. He had tried to save the girls, but Jiro claimed that rescuing people was just an excuse for Kuga to justify his actions during the fire years ago. Jiro suggested that Kuga should have left his mother behind, and Kuga laughed, acknowledging he had made the right choice. However, it was Jin who saved that family, while Kuga took all the credit. He didn't reveal this not because of his father, but because he wanted to be seen as a hero. This skewed Kuga's sense of justice. Suddenly, Jiro revealed that he was like a player and disclosed the crimes of Kuga's father. Years ago, Jiro had created players as requested by Kuga's father, but when the disaster happened, he intended to eradicate them all, only to be imprisoned by Kuga's father beneath the laboratory. Kuga's father had also brought Jiro's son there, but the son died prematurely. Jiro had grafted his son, with player abilities to save him, and taught him about revenge. Heitani then appeared and saved both of them, and since then, Jiro had hoped to take revenge on Kuga's family. At that moment, Kuga's trusted assistant arrived, revealing he was also part of Jiro's revenge plan. The girl then pointed the gun at her own head to threaten Kuga because she was being controlled by Jiro's son. Jiro showed Kuga the ongoing press conference, where his father was trying to justify the existence of players. However, the vice president, who was part of Jiro's faction, exposed all evidence linking the Amaji Corporation to the creation of players, and then sacrificed his life to prove it. The assistant wanted Kuga to kill his own father to become a hero. Whether Kuga wanted to or not, they would control him, either through a bug or his armor. Kuga, enraged, commanded his weapon to switch to a sword, seized it, and slashed the assistant before switching back to a gun and shooting Jiro and his son dead. However, they had already succeeded in manipulating Kuga as they intended. Kuga escorted the girl outside and reunited with the three scientists. They had been waiting for Kuga and had finished the flying armor for him. At the press conference, Heitani appeared, and Kuga's father had prepared soldiers to fight, but they were ineffective against the player Heitani had brought. Jin arrived, but even in his white form, he struggled against human form Heitani. Heitani stabbed Jin through the chest, driving the blade deeper. Kuga donned his armor, removing all its limits, and used the thrusters to fly straight to the press conference. Konoha decided to go to the conference too, and Akemi told her to come back anytime she faced difficulties. Jin, stabbed, reverted to human form, and Heitani, with the red stake made from the necklace stone, was ready to spend his life watching Jin fully awaken. Just as Heitani was about to drive the stake into Jin, Kuga flew in, slicing Heitani's player in half. Kuga's father ordered him to shoot Jin, but Kuga, realizing his armor had been weaponized by his father, saw his father as the true villain. Jin, not wanting family discord, witnessed Kuga's father ordering soldiers to aim at Kuga. His father believed Kuga would soon be replaced when the armor was mass-produced. Unable to hold back, Kuga fired his weapon, but his mother stepped in, taking the first shot. The second shot, however, still hit. Kuga then turned his sights on Heitani, who summoned the hidden players, causing them to attack humans wildly. Kuga had to face them all alone, protecting humans as well. His armor couldn't withstand the pressure, and with his will faltering, Kuga was in trouble. Heitani dropped the red stake to Jin. At that moment, the detective brought Konoha. Heitani gave Jin a choice. Either drive the stake into himself to fully transform, which would make him the enemy of all humanity, or leave it and remain as he was. Kuga wouldn't allow Jin to use the stake, suspecting Heitani might have tampered with it. When Jin attempted to grab it, Kuga fired a warning shot, but Heitani brought Tanaka to add more pressure. Jin was forced to grab the stake and ask Kuga to kill him if he turned into a demon. He then stabbed himself, transforming into his complete form. Jin retained his sanity, and his resonant aura forced the remaining hidden players back into their original forms. Surprisingly, Tanaka was also revealed to be a player. Heitani explained that once Jin's resonance forced players into their original forms, they couldn't revert to human form anymore. Tanaka, unable to accept her new appearance, went berserk. Anyone she struck turned to dust. One player electrocuting others was swiftly taken down by Jin. Kuga, meanwhile, was held by another sword-wielding player, but his expertise with firearms gave him the upper hand. Jin stood before Tanaka, unsure how to help her, as she couldn't revert to human form. Heitani revealed that he had deliberately arranged for Tanaka and Jin to meet, turning them into a family, only to claim that their family was ultimately a sham. Jin, refusing to believe this, charged at Heitani, but was repelled by a force ring. Jin circled around and landed a hit, creating a wound in Heitani. At that moment, Kuga rushed in and killed Tanaka with a single strike. Jin was thrown into a state of extreme despair, crying out in anguish. Heitani reveled in Jin's emotional collapse, believing Jin's heart had frozen, and that he would now liberate other players. Kuga fought Heitani, who thanked him for turning Jin into the cold being he was now. Konoha and the detective saw that her mother had been shot, presumably by Kuga, but she insisted Kuga was following his ideals. Kuga struggled against Heitani, but Jin decided to continue the fight. Jin grabbed Kuga's sword and used it to strike Heitani. He stabbed him, but Heitani seemed unfazed, declaring that his life's purpose was fulfilled in witnessing Jin's complete form. Saying this, Jin delivered a final blow, hurling Heitani off the building. Before dying, Heitani threw 2 rings, causing debris to fall towards Konoha. Jin and Kuga caught the falling debris, but their friendship officially ended due to their opposing ideals. Jin felt he should have saved Tanaka, but Kuga argued that victory required sacrifice. Jin didn't care for Kuga's notion of heroism, believing that being a hero had cost Kuga his humanity. Kuga refused to let Jin leave, fearing he would awaken the players and endanger humanity again. Kuga attacked Jin, but Jin pushed him away. When Kuga aimed his gun at Jin, Jin didn't bother to dodge. As the gunshot rang out, 3 years passed, and the events of that night faded from memory. However, the players still lurked, attacking humans when their bloodlust rose, and Kuga continued to hunt them down. By day, he was the CEO of the corporation, but he remembered the moment when he fired the shot, only for Jin to tackle him down, revealing a tail, wings, and a mask. Jin's true demonic form. Jin broke his wings and mask before leaving. Konoha stopped her brother from chasing Jin, telling him that his sense of justice had gone too far. Mr. Amaji also intervened, believing that Mr. Kanzaki had foreseen Jin's complete transformation and had taught him to live as a human, avoiding violence to suppress his player instincts. Now, Kuga wondered who the players feared more, him or Jin. Meanwhile, Konoha and Akemi continued their charity work, searching for any sign of Jin. Jin hunted every night, tracking and eliminating players. A pursuer found him and informed him that the head of the organization wanted to meet him. Jin only asked him to watch over Kuga, and so the story of a man with no fame, seeking no attention, unfolded. He hid in the shadows, fighting to bring light, and the movie has come to an end.